The wealthy man, at the whim of his mistress, persuaded a vagabond to take away the sick wife's dresser. If only the poor fellow knew what awaited him inside. "Hey man, stop!" called out David to the man in the expensive car. It was a cool autumn evening, growing dark. David could barely move his legs after a hard day's work. He worked as a day laborer at the market, a gig arranged for him by his acquaintance Harry, who helped him out in a tough spot. Actually, David had a home too, an old rundown shack slated for demolition. It stood alone by the riverbank. The mud house had long been deemed hazardous. The roof sagged heavily in 2 places, and the paint on the walls was crumbling and cracking. A job once done by his grandmother. David's mother didn't live long. He tasted orphanhood early, and things went downhill from there. He found himself in the wrong place at the wrong time, got a sentence for being in the wrong company. And then things just went downhill further. No one would hire him. There was no opportunity for further education. The feeling that the world didn't accept him permeated David entirely. Now he simply walked the streets, glad that the day would soon end, and he could peacefully immerse himself in sleep, forgetting about reality for a few hours. "Did you want something?" David asked. He wasn't used to people like this addressing him. The man in the car was clean-shaven, his hair slicked back with gel. He wore an unbuttoned black shirt, emanating a strong cologne from the car's interior. "Listen, I need to get one thing out of my house, a vintage dresser. I'll pay you extra if you get it done today. I promised my lady a week ago, and she's arriving from Dubai today. If she sees that junk still in the house, I'm done for." The man in the car grinned smugly. "Get it out, but where to?" "Anywhere you want. Dump it at the nearest trash bin if you like. Maybe someone will find a use for it. Just gotta haul it out, you understand? And be careful not to scratch the parquet, of course. No time to hire movers. Can you help me out, huh? I'm off to pick her up now." David noticed a splendid bouquet lying on the front seat of the car, obviously meant for an equally splendid woman. People sure lived differently. Why did some have everything while others had nothing? "Okay, I can, of course. Then hop in." The car stopped. David sat in the back seat, noting that it was his first time in such a fancy car. "The dresser is old, handmade. Just need to get it out of the house. As my sweetheart says, it depresses her. Smells like old stuff. You can sell it if you want. Do whatever you like with it. It's all yours." Pulling up to a private house, David was once again amazed at how lavishly some people could live. Stepping inside, the rich man pointed to antique furniture that clearly didn't fit into the modern ceramic interior. "It's time for me to go, buddy. Not to work, but to friendship. I'll leave the keys with you. Just toss them under the mat later, okay? Aren't you afraid I might steal something after all? You picked me up from the street," David asked. The wealthy man chuckled and pulled out 5 crumpled dollars from his pocket. "Here's payment for your work. Thought I had some cash on me. It's all on cards. All right, that should do for you, I reckon." David nodded modestly, accepting the payment. "I have cameras everywhere, so I'm not worried. And you seem like a decent guy. Thanks, buddy. Take care." The wealthy man practically ran back to his car. David thought he must be very happy, rushing to his wife like that. Suddenly, a scream echoed from the house. "Your help!" It was a clear female cry for help. David thought there was nobody inside. Well, well. He hurried upstairs. He needed to figure out who needed help here. Maybe the maid fell down the stairs while hanging curtains. What else could it be? He rushed into the room on the 2nd floor where the sound was coming from and froze. A very pale woman lay by the large bed. She was lying face down and weakly waving her arms. "What's wrong with you?" David rushed to her and helped her lie down on the bed. "I'm injured. My legs won't obey. I think I'm going to die soon." "Thank you," she said, catching her breath. David noticed that the woman was still young, just over 30. She had black, curly hair just below her shoulders, black eyebrows in a crescent shape and plump lips. The deathly pallor made her even more expressive. Her large eyes literally pierced David. "And I thought there was nobody home. The owner let me in," he began to justify himself. "I see, my husband." "Wait, what? Husband?" "The fair-skinned man in the black shirt. That's your husband." David described him. How could he be her husband if he went to meet his sweetheart? "Yes, we live alone. There's no one else here. That's my husband. He's doing renovations while I'm dying. I know he's got someone else, and they can't wait to bury me, throw away all my things, and get married." You know, Ben has always been an Alphonse. Before me, he was dating a woman over 50 when he was not even 30 yet. He squandered all my money, ruined the business. I can't even afford surgery. We don't do that here. We have to go to Boston, but there's no money. What if you sell this house, the car? Wouldn't that raise enough money? David asked. She looked embarrassed. I'm sorry I scared you and burdened you with my problems. You might find money, but Ben doesn't want to. He says, I'll live with this disease all my life, and the surgery could kill me altogether. But I'm getting worse. I know I'll die soon, and that's all he wants, it seems. I'm no longer of use. He took over the business when I went in for surgery the first time. Then there were more surgeries, but nothing helped. Another one seems necessary, but it's very expensive. I think I could live a full life after that, maybe even up to 100 years. Well, at least that's what the doctors say. And of course, there are always risks. But Ben said, there's no money and why take risks? He's had a mistress for a long time and the neighbor comes to see me 3 times a day. He hired her to watch over me. That's the way it is. And I married him being a wealthy heiress. Ben found someone else and nobody cares about me. I fell, and if it weren't for you, I'd probably be lying here until the neighbor came, and she won't be here until morning. David felt sorry for her. She was a real skeleton in the rich man's closet. My name is David. Mary. Why did you fall? Were you trying to do something? I wanted to get water from the nightstand. David handed her a glass and she eagerly drank it. He looked closely at her and noticed that she was quite pretty. Her eyes seemed to smile despite her illness. I'm sorry to intrude, but your husband is just a terrible person. One shouldn't treat loved ones like that. Could you tell me what he asked you to do? Why are you even here? He asked me to move the dresser. What's wrong? David asked. My father made that dresser with his own hands. It means a lot to me as a memory. Although, what difference does it make now? Just promise me you'll take care of it, okay? David nodded. He asked if she needed anything else, and getting a negative answer, he left. The dresser turned out to be sturdy, and it took quite a bit of effort to get it out of the house. After that, David called his neighbor. He was a heavy drinker and was enticed by the money. David had to give him the same $5 that the rich man had paid. 2 hours later, the dresser stood in the small kitchenette. It occupied the empty space against the wall where the cupboard used to be. Not long ago, David had gotten rid of it because it reeked of old age. The next day, he started cleaning the dresser. He decided to store dishes and other items in it. While wiping the shelves, he found that one of them wasn't attached like the others. It slid out. David pulled it out to dust behind it, and to his surprise, he found a hole inside. Documents fell right into his hands, folded neatly in a file. They had many stamps and signatures. Everything looked quite serious. Some papers were in a foreign language. They were about some company. About a will in the name of Mary Wright. Apparently, she was the dying owner. David rushed to work to the market, and he decided to take the documents with him. After work, he stopped by Harry's, his acquaintance, and showed him his find. I don't quite understand. What is this? Are these important documents that need to be returned to the owner? Or maybe something like an expired warranty for a refrigerator? David's friend was literate. He put on his glasses and read the papers. It took about half an hour. David was already getting bored. Well, buddy, these are important documents. If you don't need them, I'd keep them with me. David frowned. After all, they didn't belong to him. He couldn't just give them away. Besides, he knew Harry too well. If he wanted to keep them, it meant the papers were indeed valuable. No, sorry, I need to return them. They're not mine. Harry nodded, shrugged. As David took the documents back, he felt his companion hesitating, as if reluctant to give them up. David almost had to snatch them from him. He said goodbye and left, but just as he reached the exit, Harry caught up with him. Stop, you won't be harmed. Just tell me you lost them, and sell them to me, huh? I'll give you good money. $1,000. You can buy yourself anything you want. David raised his eyebrows. No, Harry, I told you they need to be returned. The situation there is such that there's no other option. They could save someone's life. I'm sorry, I can't. Harry nodded. All right, no problem. Goodbye then. They shook hands and parted ways. David felt a bit uneasy. He wasn't very close with Harry, and he had heard that he was capable of terrible deeds. If these papers were so valuable that he was willing to pay $100,000 for them, then perhaps it wasn't wise to take them home. David thought that someone could break into his shack while he wasn't there. So on his way, he stopped by the park. He approached a tree right by the exit and carefully placed the documents into a hollow. It was deep, and a squirrel used to live there, but it hadn't been seen for a year. The hollow was spacious enough to fit the rolled-up papers inside. It was unlikely that anyone would stumble upon them anytime soon, and if they did, they'd likely become the possessors of very serious documents. Well, David understood. He had no other option but to secure this finding. After all, he had neither friends nor acquaintances whom he could trust with this, and his house didn't even have a lock. David was barely making ends meet, and he had absolutely nothing to take, until this day. Closer to evening, when he had already turned off the lights, there was a knock on the door. "What do you want?" he asked gruffly, without opening. "Sir, we've come to collect the papers. They're needed by someone. Here's $100. Give us the papers and we'll be on our way. If you don't give them willingly, we'll find and take them anyway. You'll be left bruised and sad with no money and no papers." David understood that there was no way out for him. "Are you from Harry? It doesn't matter. We're after the papers. They don't belong to you. Just hand them over. Let's not make things difficult for each other." David stepped onto the porch and saw that 4 big guys had come to visit him. Money was handed to him, and they looked at him expectantly. "But I returned the documents to the owner. I've explained already. I don't have them. We'll still find them. We'll even tear up the floors in your shack. Hand them over yourself." David sighed and stepped away from the door, letting the unwelcome guests into the house. Well, it was what it was. One of them entered the house while another started beating David. He tried to resist, but it was futile. He was held down by 2 while the others beat him. They broke his finger, but David kept insisting that he didn't have the documents. The house was turned upside down. They weren't joking when they said they'd tear up the floorboards. Not all of them, of course, but in some places. All of this went on for a couple of hours. "All right, buddy, you win. Let's go, guys. He doesn't have anything. Looks like he really returned them." "Scum!" His finger was throbbing painfully. It was unbearable to touch. David tried to set it himself, screaming in pain, and wrapped it with bandages. He washed up, wiped the blood off his face, and went to bed. He didn't have the strength for anything else. Well, he didn't expect this from Harry. He'd have to look for a new job. He didn't want to deal with such a rotten person anymore. The entire next day he suffered from pain. Eventually he went to the emergency room, where they put a cast on his broken finger. He spent 3 hours there. "Are you going to file a report?" the doctor asked, clearly seeing that the guy had been beaten up. "No, I won't," he replied. "What if they come back?" the doctor asked. "They won't come back, no reason to return." From the hospital he went straight to the park, retrieved his documents, and looking around cautiously, headed to the rich man's house. It warmed his heart to know that yesterday's thugs, in their cruelty, had forgotten to take the money, and David still had $10,000 in his hands, which he intended to use to buy clothes and food for himself. Plus, he could pay some bills in advance. He did this because he often fell ill in winter and couldn't work, and the bills were simply exorbitant beyond his means. David arrived at the rich man's house. He hesitated to go inside. What if he hired the thugs himself, not Harry? Such a thought lingered in his mind, but he was almost certain that it was Harry who orchestrated the attack. In the end, he waited for over an hour. When the owner left, David quietly sneaked into the house through the only open window. He crawled in like a thief and quietly entered Mary's bedroom. She was sleeping or dozing, but the sound of the door opening startled her. "What are you doing here?" she exclaimed in alarm. The woman looked even worse. Apparently her illness was weakening her. "I brought you something. I found it in that same dresser you gave me. You told me your father made it, and there are very valuable papers inside. Maybe they'll help you get that operation." Mary frowned and began to examine the documents. She was educated, knew 3 languages, and easily understood what was in front of her. "Oh my God, my mother and I couldn't figure out where my father was investing money. We even forgot about them already. He was rich, but after his death, he left only this house and the company. But there must have been more money. Here they all are. And that's why he always insisted I keep this dresser and keep it clean. He knew I would find the papers. He always had many enemies, and he was afraid to advertise how wealthy he was. Even his will didn't reflect the whole truth. Here they are. Oh my God, this is a huge amount, and everything is ready here. All that's left is to cash it out." David smiled. Well, that's great. I'm glad your things are looking up. All right, then I'll go. It seemed he was now superfluous here. Wait, firstly, thank you. After all, you could have kept it all for yourself. With a lawyer, you could easily withdraw this money. All the data is here. But you brought it to me. Yes, honesty surprises people today, but it's perfectly normal. Mary smiled. True, but still, thank you. And what second? He asked. And secondly, I need your help. My husband will simply take everything and throw me away. I need to run, but I can't. Well, if you want, I'll take you. There's a hotel in town where you can rent a room under a false name for cheap. They don't ask for passports. Do you want me to take you there and keep an eye on you? And you can withdraw the money and finally go to the clinic. Yes, that's a good idea. You'll just save me. But I can't go alone and I don't have any money yet. Don't worry, I'll cover it, David smiled. Mary took a closer look. It's like you've been beaten up. Did something happen? David explained that he first showed some papers to a greedy associate, and he sent thugs after him. You're a hero, seriously, that's extraordinary decency. You sacrificed yourself. You know, I won't forget this, honestly. Oh, come on, I didn't come here to ask for rewards, but to help someone in need. It's not heroism, although I understand why it surprises you. Your husband apparently is not the most decent person. That's an understatement, she replied. David helped her up, gathered the items she pointed out. It ended up being 2 hefty bags. But Mary took everything. She wrote a note to her husband, saying she was going to a hospice, didn't want to hinder him from building a new life, and asked him not to look for her. He was supposed to buy it. Half an hour later, Mary entered the hotel with David. They introduced themselves as husband and wife. David explained that his spouse was ill and he would be taking care of her. He said they were passing through town. He came up with a nice creative profession for himself, a sculptor. No one knows famous sculptors by face, and creative people often look unkempt. It's inherent to their personality. So David's scruffy appearance didn't raise suspicions. They had a pleasant conversation with the concierge and soon found themselves alone in the room. Now there's no one to take care of you. Do you want me to stay? He asked. It was awkward. Only now did he realize she needed care. She needed help getting to the bathroom, taking a shower. It's nothing. I'll manage on my own. No, I'll stay after all, he said seriously. They spent the whole evening talking about life. David talked about his mother, how hard it was without her, and suddenly realized he was very lonely, just like Mary. Her parents had been gone for a long time, and in search of closeness, she ended up with the wrong person and now had to suffer from her choice. She married Ben, and after that her health problems started, one surgery after another. In the end, over 4 years, while the business was entirely in his hands, they lost all income. They had to lay off staff and sell the office. Now what was left of the business only helped them from starving. When the doctors said they could do an operation to fix everything, I was happy. I was so tired of this medicine. And what's wrong with you exactly? David asked. It's something with my thyroid. I don't want to bore you with details, but there's a way to get back to life. If I can, if it's not too late. But Ben flat out refused. He wanted children. And this operation, if it goes wrong, could take away my ability to have them. And besides, there's always the chance that I won't survive the surgery. Always? Yes, anesthesia is a risk. But you're still willing? I'm ready for anything. I want to live. He took her hand. A complete stranger, a vagabond, suddenly became so close. The next 5 days they spent together. David bought her a phone, paid for the hotel with his own money, brought food. Meanwhile, Mary found a lawyer who helped cash part of the funds. As soon as the money was in her hands, she decided to help David. After all, he told her about the conditions he lived in, almost on the street, in a dilapidated shack that could kill him every day if it collapsed. She understood that she had to help him, but didn't know how, exactly. He wouldn't take the money. In the end, she paid for a room for him, where she herself lived for 2 months in advance. The payment included 3 meals a day. She also arranged a card in his name and loaded a substantial amount onto it. Just don't scold me, please. Tomorrow I'm flying to Boston. I've already arranged everything. I left something for you here. You spent your last on me. I don't even know where you got them from without working. I want you to have a roof over your head, to be warm and fed. And this is the card. The money on it is yours. I know it's inconvenient, but please take it, because I owe you. David shook his head. "Oh, stop it. I won't take anything from you. Listen, I have a serious operation ahead, and I'll worry if I know you've returned to that wreck. It's not right. Doctors don't recommend it. And you almost live on the street." Mary hugged him. David said nothing. He just didn't know how to react. Money, of course, wouldn't hurt in his situation, but he didn't want to take it. It was difficult to refuse now, so he just kept silent. "The taxi will be here soon. I need you to help me get there." She smiled, and he suddenly realized that Mary was much more attractive than any woman he had ever met. She was without makeup, without fancy clothes. "Okay, we'll talk about it when you get back, but I won't take the money. Although, since you paid for the room, I guess I'll stay here." "That's great." He put her on the plane and returned to the hotel. It became empty without her. Mary called in the evening. "Imagine, I can skip the surgery. They told me I can try medication. It's even more expensive, but it should help. Well, if it doesn't help, then I'll go under the knife, and, well, that's great. And the medication, does it provide temporary relief?" "No, the therapy should normalize hormone function. We'll just have to monitor everything afterward. I have a rare condition. Doctors couldn't understand what was happening for a long time, and because of the hormones, other problems with the body began. I have weak health. But it seems I will live." David smiled. He heard that Mary no longer sees herself as doomed. When he first saw her, she spoke to him as if she were doomed. He even thought then that she had cancer. Fortunately, her illness was actually treatable. "I'm very glad, and I'm waiting for you. Come back soon. I think I'll stay here for about 10 days. If they see that the pills are helping, they'll let me go home, and if not, we'll think about surgery." Over the next 10 days, Mary and David spent hours on the phone. They missed each other, discussing various trivialities, movies, politics. They talked about everything and nothing, like teenagers. And on the 10th day, Mary announced that she was coming back. The medication had helped. She could walk on her own now, and she had the strength to live. David met her at the airport and saw that she had changed. She became even more attractive. She wore a little makeup, but she had bought new clothes and gone to the beauty salon. "You look great," he said. David himself hadn't been idle during this time either. He found a part-time job in another market, away from Harry and his thugs, and earned enough for new clothes. Living in a hotel room, he didn't have to spend money on food. He got a haircut, bought new razors, and also looked different. Women even started noticing him. David was handsome. On the day Mary arrived, they finally confessed their feelings for each other. They spent a day in each other's arms, and then Mary filed for divorce. That same evening, Ben called her. "What's this about? Divorce? You said you were in hospice, that you were dying," he exclaimed. Mary didn't know that at that moment he was with his lover, the capricious blonde Anna, or as he called her, Bunny. "Is that all you cared about anyway? Never mind. Wait, so you're not dying? I thought the doctors told me that." "Oh God, you're horrible. No, I'm not dying. And I'm divorcing you. Where did you even get this number?" "I got it through acquaintances," he revealed. "Please don't call me again. You have a lover, stay with her. I thought you were dying. It was hard for me. Please understand me. Maybe I don't want a divorce after all." "But I do." Mary hung up. What revelations, and he lied to her that she wouldn't die. At that same moment, Ben had a serious conversation. "You don't want a divorce? What are you talking about?" The blonde pouted. "Anna, darling, I just didn't want to split the assets. This house was given to her by her parents. The court will leave it to her, and the company has almost ceased to exist. We'll be left with nothing. It's just not beneficial for us. Maybe she will die after all, huh? We just need to delay the divorce. I tried to talk her out of it." At that moment, Anna felt she might lose him, and he still looked quite attractive in her eyes. That's good, because soon there will be 3 of her. "What?" Ben was surprised. He stared at her with blue eyes, not knowing how to react. "I'm pregnant. I didn't want to say it, but I decided you should know. It's still early, but the ultrasound confirmed everything. I'm in the first trimester." "Trimester, it's called trimester," he corrected her and hugged her gently. Ben dreamed of having children. He convinced Mary to undergo medication therapy when they realized they couldn't conceive. After that, things started to go downhill. Apparently, the hormonal therapy triggered a series of changes in her already unhealthy body. It either triggered or exacerbated an existing problem, but since then, everything went wrong for her. Pregnancy was no longer a priority. At some point, Mary began to feel better and they both underwent examinations. But before receiving the results, Mary lost consciousness and nearly died. As she fell, she hit her head, resulting in an intracranial hematoma, and she had to undergo surgery. Ben was deeply troubled at that time. After the operation, she was further examined and a problem with her endocrine system was identified. Doctors talked about the necessity of treatment. One illness led to another and then another, making her condition progressively worse. When doctors said she could die and the surgery was too expensive, Ben simply resigned himself to the situation. It was around that time that Anna came into his life. The divorce process was fraught with complications. Ben delayed as much as he could, but seeing Mary lively and standing on her own, he realized he couldn't hope for her to become a widow. He wanted to talk to her to understand what had happened and how she had started to recover. For this, he suggested meeting up. Mary agreed to meet and told him she had found a treatment. Without going into details, she only clarified that he himself was the reason for her recovery. "Me? How?" Ben asked. "You decided to throw away the dresser, and if you hadn't touched it, I might not have been here, but you hired someone to remove it, and at that moment, my fate changed." "Something was in the dresser, wasn't it?" he guessed. "That's none of your concern. Tomorrow we'll settle everything. It will be the final hearing, and I'll finally be free from you." Ben felt hurt that she was so happy while he was not. Meanwhile, Anna pressured him. She talked about wanting a lavish wedding dress, even though Ben hadn't even proposed to her. In court, Mary honestly recounted the horror she experienced upon hearing that her husband was entertaining someone else in the next room. Under such circumstances, the court surely should consider that the spouse hardly deserves anything. Ben realized he was about to be left with nothing and spoke up. "Yes, I met someone, but I always took care of my wife. I hired a caregiver for her. After all, I'm only human. I have needs for love and care too. And I'm not to blame for falling deeply in love with someone else. But I didn't dare leave my dying wife. These were the circumstances. I'm sorry you had to hear all this, but I didn't think it would turn out like this," he said tearfully. "And now we're expecting a child. I just want to get a divorce. Let justice decide." "You can't have children, Ben. When we got tested, the doctor sent me the results. I was unwell at the time. There was surgery, and I forgot to tell you, and we never talked about it again. You're infertile. So if I were you, I'd ask your lover who the father of her child is," she said. Anna wasn't present in the courtroom. The judge sighed, looking at Ben, and soon a verdict was reached. Ben got next to nothing. Essentially, only what he had earned himself. Everything remained with Mary. Returning home, Ben drank. Anna returned late in the evening, and the smell of alcohol emanated from her too. "I was out with friends and I only had a couple of sips, and honestly, it won't harm the baby. Pregnant women can have a little alcohol, don't worry," she said. "You know what, I'm infertile," he said. His words rang out like thunder on a clear day. After them, a dead silence hung in the air. Anna literally froze in place, then quietly sat down next to him. "I didn't know," she finally murmured. "Whose child is it?" he asked. "There's no child. I thought I was pregnant, but it turned out I wasn't. I didn't want to upset you later. I thought I still had time to get pregnant. You wanted a baby so much." Ben understood that it was all a deception from the start. She just wanted his money, wanted to tie him down to provide for her. "I see. Well, pack your things. I don't want to see you anymore," he said. Anna lifted her head proudly, gathered her things and left in a taxi, but she hoped he would change his mind. Meanwhile, Mary and David moved together into a small apartment in the city center. Mary soon sold the house and bought new accommodation with the money. The house held the heaviest memories for Mary: the death of her parents, her illness, and thoughts of imminent death. She decided to start over, and David proposed to her, and she was already planning to take his last name. She was preparing to become Mary Sanders, picking out a dress for herself. David worked in her new company, which she had founded not long ago. Things became much easier for her, and she focused on her business. Unlike Ben, Mary knew how to run things. She was the only child in the family, and her father had taught her the value of hard work, taught her all the basics. So she started her own company, hired old employees, the most loyal ones she had known for years. She had many connections, from the fire department to the product market. So business picked up fairly quickly. However, she was still undergoing treatment. Now she could engage in sports, had more strength, but the treatment continued. And Mary took care of herself, delegating some of her responsibilities to David. He started wearing business suits, and he realized they suited him terribly. Work was going well. He easily found common ground with people because he looked like a god in expensive suits, and he talked to everyone as a simple person, wise with life experience, kind and understanding. Everyone in the new company loved him. Looking at him, Mary realized she hadn't made a mistake. She was in love. A couple of months later, someone knocked on her door. It was Anna. "Do you know me?" she began. "I came to talk about David. I call him Davy. It just feels like saying it, forgive me." Mary smiled uncertainly. "What did you want?" she asked. "I came to say that a couple of weeks ago I had an affair with your husband. We spent only 2 nights together, and he left me. For you. He said he loves you, so take care of him. And I came to say that I lost and I'm leaving forever." Anna left, leaving Mary in a state of bewilderment. She was tired of waiting for Ben to return and decided to spite the one who ruined everything. She couldn't just leave it as it was. She had to tell him he was infertile. What was it to her? He didn't know, and they were getting divorced. Anna blamed Ben's ex-wife for everything. Realizing it was all over, she decided to seek revenge. Fortunately, Mary had never seen her husband's mistress. She was confined to bed. After telling her all this, Anna went to celebrate her victory. Let her remain alone, but her rival wouldn't be happy either. Mary just sat down on the couch and began to reminisce. David had stayed late at work twice, just at the times she had mentioned. So, was it true? She began to feel like she sensed a chill from his side. He would turn away, blaming it on a cold. Was he afraid of infecting her, or was he ashamed of his infidelity? And what did she really know about him anyway? Thoughts consumed her. Mary could barely wait for him to come home. And as soon as he did, she unleashed everything the blonde had told her. "I don't understand what you're talking about. There was no one else for me. Only you. And why would I need someone else? It never even crossed my mind. I love you. Just confess, please. I promise I'll try to forgive you. Why do you believe some stranger over me? Have I given you any reason to doubt?" David was getting angry. What was even happening? Who was this girl spreading all this nonsense to her? "I don't know you," she said, scared, and she was terrified. When she married Ben, it felt like forever. She trusted him, and when she heard he was with someone else, just beyond the wall, while she was in such a state, she wished she could die. Of course, it didn't pass without a trace, and now she began to doubt everyone, trusting no one. Think about why she came here and told you everything. Maybe you have enemies. Maybe it's the machinations of competitors. We've crossed a lot of people in our business. He tried to smooth things over, but Mary couldn't contain herself anymore. She burst into tears. "It's all you. You're just like all of them, like Ben. Leave, I'll never forgive you. You didn't even have the courage to confess. I hate all of you." David turned and left as he was. He had his briefcase with him. Inside there was a charger, a phone, and some cash. With that money, he bought some food and headed to his old shack. He opened the door and went in. How long had it been since he was here? Over half a year. Now it wasn't as cold outside, but he still turned on the heating. It was uncomfortable to walk around in a suit, so he rummaged through his closet. There was his old worn-out clothes. David changed into them and stood in front of the mirror. He looked better now, neatly trimmed, clean-shaven. "Who are you fooling? You're almost a bum. What kind of businessman are you? Mary? You can't keep her. She threw you away like a kitten. Maybe nobody told her anything. Maybe you just bored her. The rich are different. They won't understand someone like you, and you'll never understand them," he said to his reflection in the mirror. It hurt and was humiliating. He wanted to cry. He missed her. But he pulled himself together. The next day, he went out to look for a job. There was almost no money left. However, he found nothing that day or the next. And when dizziness from hunger began, David went to the market to Harry. "Back again. Knew you'd come," Harry said. "I need a job. I'm good at what I do, you know." Looking at him was disgusting. His finger had healed, but it still hurt. "I know, fine. Go to the stores by the eastern wall. They need someone there." Harry looked at him with disdain and left. He gave him stalls with the heaviest merchandise. Unloading them, you'd sweat for sure, and if it was cold, it threatened an instant cold, and even a strained back. David worked there for a week. It rained that day. He kept thinking about Mary, remembering her, and it hurt in his soul, and all the pain he vented out in his muscles. Towards evening, his temperature rose. Harry wasn't cheating with the money, which was good, but he looked at him like a mangy dog, and he wasn't even ashamed. The next day, David warned that he was sick. And who will work then? If you need a job, come in or you're fired. David clenched his teeth out. I'll come. He worked all day with a fever. After receiving the money, he went home but felt unwell. He sat on a bench at the bus stop and dozed off. The heat was very intense. His whole body ached from the day's work. It seemed like he would just collapse and never wake up again. He shivered. He wanted to warm up, but he didn't have the strength to get up. An hour later, a woman approached him. She was young, with a very friendly, fluffy dog on a leash and a little child who looked a lot like her. Due to his high temperature, David hallucinated that Mary was next to him. The woman resembled her. Mary, did you come? Are you feeling unwell? Should I call an ambulance? Very unwell, yes, without you. The stranger noticed that he didn't smell of alcohol, only menthol. It was his only medicine that day. I'll call an ambulance right now. It seems you have a fever. Then David realized that the woman before him was a stranger. Don't call, let me die. I don't want to live like this anymore. They treated me like a dog, accused me of things I didn't do. They abandoned and betrayed me. Wouldn't you want to live if they treated you like that? She smiled. I would. I have a son, Jack, our dog. How would they manage without me? Surely you have someone worth living for too. David shook his head. No one left. There was only one, Mary. You know, she even wanted to take my last name, but we never got married. The stranger still called the doctors and asked which hospital they would take him to, and the next day she visited him, bringing oranges. He got worse. The doctors are preparing for surgery. You can visit him, but not for long, said the elderly, serious nurse. Sarah frowned. She dropped off Peter at daycare and hurried to the hospital to check on the rescued man. She felt he was very lonely. She wanted to talk to him, maybe help in some way. She didn't want him to do anything irreversible out of loneliness. Sarah didn't usually act like this, but seeing him made her feel sorry for him. Sarah entered the room, and for a second, David hallucinated that Mary had come. "My, you look so much like her," he said it, and it hurt inside. David could barely breathe. He was very weak. "I came to visit you. You scared me yesterday, saying you didn't want to live. You're still young. Everything will work out. And if you need help, you can take my phone number. I can help with work. I don't have much money. I'm a primary school teacher, but if you need medicine, I'll help and feed you. You know, it's not pity. I've had tough times too. My husband left me alone with our child. He was only 4 months old then. I grew up in an orphanage. My parents turned their backs on me. And I'm all alone in this world too." David listened to her embarrassedly. "I won't be able to save your number. My phone died. I didn't have a charger with me. I never made it home. But if I survive, I'll be here. Come by. Let's talk. If I'm alive, maybe I can help you with whatever I can. You know, drive a nail or walk a dog. You, it seems, saved my life yesterday. I owe you." "My name is Sarah." "David." Sarah smiled. "Then I'll come by again. You'll make it. The doctors told me you're not seriously injured," she lied. David believed her, and he felt calmer. An hour later, fluid was drained from his lungs. He lay in the ward, coming out of anesthesia, when there were muffled clicks of heels on the tiles in the hospital corridor. It was Mary, finding out David was in the hospital, coming to visit him. When she found out she was pregnant, thoughts changed in her head. Who was that woman, and what did she need? By chance, she met Ben on the street. He said he missed her, that he had driven away his ex, who lied to him about having a child. "Do you happen to have her photo?" Mary asked. A thought closed in her head. What if it was her who had come? Ben found her profile on social media and turned his phone screen to her. Mary glanced at the photo of the beautiful blonde and immediately understood everything. "Okay, I forgive you for everything. Be happy," she said, and happily hugged him. Then she turned and ran. She started calling David but couldn't get through. She started looking for him. She had to turn to an acquaintance in the authorities. When he called back, Mary had already prepared her speech. She wanted to apologize, make peace, and tell him that David would soon be a father. "David Sanders is in the hospital. He's having surgery. Shall I give you the address?" her acquaintance said on the phone. Mary felt sick. It was her fault. She didn't believe him. How could she have treated him like that? And he got sick without her. Mary rushed to him so fast she almost got into an accident. She kept telling herself, "Everything will be fine." When she was allowed to enter the ward, David was just coming out of anesthesia. She questioned all the doctors to death, asking about every detail of his health. "He'll live, calm down," the doctor on duty answered. Now Mary stood in the ward in a white coat, overshoes, and a cap, watching her beloved man open his eyes. "Sarah, did you come?" he asked. "What, Sarah?" Mary didn't understand. David shifted, grimacing in pain. There were IV drips in his hands. The anesthesia made him dizzy, but he clearly saw that it was her in front of him. "Is it you? Oh, Sarah. She just walked by and called the ambulance for me. I've never cheated on you," he said, offended. Mary burst into tears. I know, probably. Hormonal changes have started in me and I freaked out. I'm such an idiot. I treated you so horribly. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be alive, and I would have driven you away. Don't forgive me. Drive me away. No, please forgive me. I can't live without you." David smiled as he said, "Come to me." Mary sank down to him. "I missed you so much. It's all because of my ex, Ben. She must have thought I ruined her happiness. I'm just dying of shame and guilt towards you. How can I make amends for my guilt?" "I've already forgiven you. Just try to learn to trust me," he said. "All right, but to justify myself, I can say that I'm pregnant with you. I'm terribly pregnant, completely. I feel nauseous, and I have mood swings." David was surprised. "Pregnant? Seriously, can you be pregnant?" He was worried about her. After all, she had just finished therapy. "Yes, doctors said everything's fine now. Pregnancy can even have a positive effect on the endocrine system, and everything will stabilize. Of course, there are risks, but I'll be under constant medical supervision, more than other pregnant women." "That's amazing," said David. And it was the absolute truth. He was just happy. David remained in the same hospital for a few more days. Mary got tired of it, and she invited her doctor to examine her beloved and allow him to go home. The doctor ordered him to stay under observation for a few more days, which upset Mary, but there was nothing she could do. Nevertheless, David was recovering, despite having suffered severe pneumonia. Fluid continued to be drained from him. Precautions were necessary. One day in the hospital corridor, Mary finally met Sarah. Upon learning who she was, Mary began to thank her, while Sarah kept looking at her strangely. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Mary asked. "I think I know who you are," Sarah replied. Mary frowned. Many in the town knew her family. "You're my sister," said Sarah. Mary's eyebrows shot up. Her father had been trying to find his first child all his life. His wife, Mary's mother, gave birth early, very early. They left the baby in an orphanage, and when they tried to find her, it was already too late. The trail went cold. Everything got mixed up. As a result, Sarah grew up in a foster family. But when she was 15, they died, and she found herself back in an orphanage. While her foster parents were still alive, they helped her find her biological relatives. Sarah was shocked then. She expected them to be alcoholics or worse, but they were the most influential family in town. She wanted to go visit them and say, "Here I am." But pain overcame the desire to hug her father and mother, and yet they had rejected her, didn't want her. She didn't know they were looking for a daughter, regretted leaving her in the orphanage. In the end, she just watched their lives from afar. She knew about Mary too, but didn't seek a meeting. Mary also knew she had a sister somewhere, but even with her father's connections, they couldn't find her. The documentation was a mess. Computers didn't yet store information back then, and a fire destroyed many important records. "Is it you?" Mary looked at Sarah with curiosity. I'm not intruding, and I never thought we'd meet like this. Oh my God, we were looking for you. Our parents really wanted to find you. They were looking for me." Mary and Sarah sat on a couch in the hospital corridor and talked for hours until they were interrupted by David, who came out of the ward. When he appeared, Sarah and Mary began to tell him eagerly that they were biological sisters. "This can't be," said David. When he was discharged, Mary and Sarah picked him up together. Mary became very attached to her sister, asking her about her pregnancy, what she felt. They tried to make up for all those years when they didn't know each other. Besides, Mary simply adored Peter, her nephew, and spoiled him as much as she could. Then she divided all the savings equally. All the money she received, she cashed in those securities from the drawer. Sarah protested, didn't want to accept. There's no discussion about it. Dad would have done the same. Everything is common now, understand? They were looking for you. Mom really dreamed of finding you. So I'll compensate you for everything they couldn't do. You're the heiress. Before this, Sarah insisted that they take a DNA test, and only when the positive result of their kinship came, she accepted her sister's help. Becoming rich, Sarah realized her dream. She opened a private online school and started working with children remotely. Alternative education was gaining momentum. A law was passed, making it optional to attend school in person. Sarah taught children who wanted to receive education at home. Her business was booming, and the profit was good. Yes, you have the genes of our father, said Mary. He was a born businessman. That's why you succeeded from the first try. Well done. I'm proud of you. Sarah often recalled how she called an ambulance for a stranger, and how that act changed her life. They became friends with David, and as promised, he helped her around the house. Not with putting up shelves, but with moving. Sarah started renting out her small apartment, which she inherited from the state as an orphan, and bought herself a newer, bigger place. David and Mary continued to work side by side. Mary blamed herself for her actions for a long time and was afraid of losing him. But David forgave her instantly because he loved her deeply and understood that everyone makes mistakes. Their company flourished. Ben disappeared from Mary's life forever, moving abroad to his relatives and starting anew. After Mary forgave him, it seemed easier for him to do so. But Anna, she heard that her lie had worked and Mary and David had broken up. Then she was very pleased with her victory. She decided she needed to find another fool and trick him. And in the club, she met a handsome, athletic man. She didn't know what kind of person he was, and soon Anna realized she was actually pregnant. But her child's father didn't want the baby and had no intention of marrying her. He was from a criminal family and threatened to kill her if she demanded anything from him. She didn't know there were such cruel people. Frightened, she went for an abortion, only to be told that it was too late and there were contraindications. She had to give birth. Anna agreed to give the child to a childless couple, but after giving birth, she realized she couldn't. She was left alone with the baby in her arms. She gained a lot of weight, drowning her loneliness and sorrow in sweets. Fortunately, her parents helped. Soon, she had to get a job as a saleswoman in a local shop. Decent men no longer paid attention to her, but she was happy in her own way, because she had a beloved son. Meanwhile, David and Mary had a long-awaited daughter, whom they named Ellie. While Mary was on maternity leave, all the work fell on David's shoulders. He forgot that he had once worked for Harry. So, when he met him in his office, he was extremely surprised, but Harry was even more astonished. He came to the local businessman to negotiate cooperation. Harry's business was hanging by a thread, and only cooperation with a company like David and Mary's could stabilize his affairs. I understand you won't help me, right? But business and personal matters shouldn't be mixed. You're a professional, David. Besides, I've helped you many times, remember? We've had our moments. Let's leave it all in the past and you just listen to my proposal. Then make a decision, like a professional, not like a market porter. David understood that Harry was trying to butter him up. He regretted that he had ever been manipulated by him. And how can I do business with someone who hired thugs to beat me up? I don't want to have anything to do with you. Leave and don't show up in front of me again. Well, when you go broke again, don't ask me for a job, said Harry, leaving. I won't. Now the market territory will belong to me, he said. Harry realized that it was David who bought the territory, essentially coming to the one who ruined his modest business. David didn't intend to do it intentionally. Mary had been dealing with the deal even before her maternity leave. Harry was just a tenant, and the company was expanding. The plan was to buy land for trading and renting, and the market territory was just right. Harry left and David never saw him again. He and Mary expanded their business and now dreamed of a son, so little Ellie wouldn't be bored. And besides, David had always dreamed of a big family.